Hi, this is Eternal King here, bringing you another LOR video today. So I wanted to provide a final meta update on the state of LOR. So again, ladder's been open for about a month now. I don't think the meta is going to be changing much beyond this. So let's kind of discuss the state of things in terms of, what's good in the game, what's bad in the game, whether any of it matters. So first up is aggro. Aggro is still a very viable way to play the game. For those that don't know, I climbed to Masters in basically a weekend of aggro play. So basically week one, that ladder unlocked, immediately hit Masters and immediately hit top 100. There's nothing about Eternal and the way that the game is played now that makes this type of build any less sustainable or playable or powerful. Again, the main counter that you will run into is some form of Demacia pile, and if you are a good aggro pilot, simply playing, Petrocite Broadwing plus the 3 mana Challenger that heals 2 shouldn't be enough to take you down, and by the time their Tempo 6 drop lands in the Eddy pile, you'll be so far beyond winning that you're just like finishing them off with like decimates and stuff, or Noxian Fervors and all that. So again, Eddy card piles only win a lot because they self-pilot for the most part. So again, you can slam Eddy into any deck with Tempo 6 drops, and that deck will have a 60% win rate. Whether it is Auction Eddy, Demacia Eddy is more straightforward because you're playing Broadwing into Tempo 6 drop, which is just inherently a more new player friendly line than a lot of the other ways to get to Eddy. And by get to Eddy, I mean Tempo 6 drops. Nobody actually plays Eddy, they just play the Tempo 6 drops. Six mana cards that have the play effect, and then Eddy comes down, they come down with a boon basically. But like whether it is like a mobilized Demacia pile, and there's been many different versions, whether it is a version of this deck that does not run mobilized and is more of a mid-range build, again, that's all like standard stuff, and like it's always going to be powerful enough because Demacia as a region is just powerful enough. Like there's very few versions of Demacia that are inherently bad, and are inherently not new player friendly. That's just the way the region is just Demacia has existed in the game long enough that it is a good region in terms of its power scaling for tempo early drops and their trading value, and things like playing a 4/4 for 3 mana, and then playing Petrocite Broadwing a 0/3 for 2 mana that challenges, and just like Broadwing into Badger Bear is just good enough. And you can also run the Scholarly Pioneer as an additional card. So like all this stuff, doesn't really matter until you get into your higher mana tempo plays. A good player though should be able to just push through all this and not give a damn about any of it, because none of it's powerful enough on its own, or it doesn't have a real win con or anything like that. So again, aggro is good. Demacia card piles are good because they do Demacia things. Control decks. So control can change faces a little bit, right? So it can go from like high synergy meta Jace Lux to low synergy Victor Ezreal. So if you don't know, these decks are basically polar opposites of each other. Jace Lux basically needs you to play a champion, and then you play a 6 mana card, and then there's a lot of high synergy stuff that's happening. Victor Ezreal basically is the opposite, where you just play the Victor for the sake of playing him, and you play the Ezreal for the sake of playing them, and then they get value that way. It doesn't matter if they die, and they don't need to synergize with other cards, they get value on play. Or in the case of Victor, he just sticks and gets value. So again, control is good, mid-range is good, aggro is good. Other stuff that you want to play, non-interactive burn, elusives, something like Nora Swain control. Again, everything that I've talked about, and you can go through all my previous videos about the Eternal meta. And like, if you don't believe me, there's essentially 2 versions of Eternal players. There are Eternal players who think they know everything and are in Masters and therefore do know quite a bit. And then there are Eternal players who've been playing Eternal ranked for over a month now and are still not in Masters, and therefore don't have a right to say anything. Because again, the ladder's been open for basically, 4 weeks. Like, you can't get to Masters in 4 weeks. You're not going to get to Masters. That's just how it is. That's just the hard truth. If you are any good at the game in terms of sustaining a decent win rate, you can do it in a week. If you're more middling, you'll do it in 2 weeks. If you're bad, you won't do it in 4, right? That's the scale of play we're talking about here. Things like Meta Temple, again, Meta Temple is a decent deck, right? There's nothing stopping people from playing Temple if they want to. There's nothing stopping people from playing things like Samira and Auction if they want to. It's just that some of these things are easier to pilot than others. So Demacia card piles are the most reliable way to win games without needing to understand the game. Aggro has to transition from pushing damage to burning the opponent out, and when you make that transition and how you make that transition is what determines a good aggro player and a bad aggro player, as well as certain tech cards and things like that. Other decks require high synergy solutions. Again, something like Burn Aggro has to set up its puzzle pieces to burn properly, things like Prankster and Neverglade Collector. So, all these decks require certain applications and strategies and card, basically playing your cards in a certain order and which is called sequencing. And all these decks require something. Meta-Driven Rumble requires that you play for a certain win condition, which is Rumble with Overwhelm. So these decks are inherently going to win less than something like the Meta Demacia card pile because your fail states don't exist in this deck. Basically, with a Meta Demacia card pile, you either lose the game because you were outplayed, or you win the game because you kept playing things. And that's really the extent of how these decks work. You played Petricite Broadwing, you played Blocking Badger Bear, you played your 4-mana card, that challenges something, and then you played Morgana, and then you played your 6-drops. So, that's the line you're going to run with every single Demacia card pile, is just high tempo 2-drop, high tempo 3-drop, keep those, trade in those things and swing for value. Eventually you play tempo 6-drop. And it's basically the gap between Petricite Broadwing and Blocking Badger Bear and, the high value 6-drops hitting. That's your window to win the game against a Demacia card pile. So it's basically your game to lose when you're piloting this. And the emphasis is all on the opponent to win the game. So that's powerful in the sense that it's powerful because it isn't powerful. It's powerful because it can't lose unless the opponent outplays you. So that's the power of the Demacia pile. I'm going to keep playing stuff and playing stuff and playing stuff, and if you don't beat me before I reach a critical mass of stuff, then you're going to lose the game. Not because I did anything special, but because I didn't. So that's powerful. It's powerful because it isn't. And that's really the extent of it, right? So control is good, aggro is good, mid-range is good. Certain things like Undir is kind of fallen off in the Demacia pile because Undir can be punished, right? Undir is a very punishable deck, a very easy to punish deck. His win rate is basically plummeted off the stats to non-existence again, because again, people just started playing Aphelios and just gravitumming him every turn, and then he never got to attack and the game was over. And again, there's more hard counters than that, but that's just one that pro players know. But that's basically the meta, and that will be the meta for the rest of time in Eternal until we get the next card expansion. So I'm not going to be providing any more additional videos because everything I said before is applicable now. And if you've listened to it, you should already be masters in Eternal. And if you're not, that's your own fault. And I was so long ago that I've practically forgotten about it. And I've done so many things since then that aren't LOR related. But yeah, that's Eternal King signing out. Aggro, mid-range Demacia card pile, control deck. Don't play Rise, don't play memes, and if you want to be good at the game, don't play meta. But again, there's more decision making involved in that. Demacia piles are good because they aren't, and they are very counterable by any decent player. This is Eternal King signing out.